I had about 15 times. There's life-threatening miracles. I survived them. I always said the right thing, and I did the right thing at the right time. I asked myself, how come? How was I so lucky? I figured God needed a witness, someone who can talk about it at my age. That's why I decided to start the Zachor Foundation to keep this world from acquiring amnesia.
This is by far the most difficult episode I have ever recorded on HIListically Speaking. But I've been wanting to do this topic for quite some time, and I will say it comes with a trigger warning. When I met Ben Lesser, it was at a podcast meetup where he was the guest, and each of us had an opportunity to ask him questions. Ben is a Holocaust survivor. He is 96. He's still speaking in public. He's making a difference in the world, and he's sharing his story courageously and with utmost vulnerability. He doesn't have to do that. He's 96. But you know what? He has a responsibility. That's how he sees it. So when I met Ben and also his daughter Gail, I realized I don't just want this to be about Ben's story, but more about family and how we are connecting with our ancestors so that when stories are told, we know how to continue the legacy. And of course, we don't want to forget history, right? Whoever listens to a witness becomes a witness. Elie Wiesel said that, another Holocaust survivor. But how Ben puts it, we cannot allow the world to acquire amnesia. So I'm going to let Ben be the one to tell this story himself and have Gail come on and share some of her experiences as well as being a daughter of a Holocaust survivor. And then you can choose, because it is about choice, how you want to go forward and make sure that we're never silenced. And history is always something that we remember so that the atrocities never happen again. So I first want to say thank you for being here. Gail, thank you as well for being here as well. And there's a reason why I brought both of you on. You know, a lot of times I do these conversations just with one guest, but I think there's real value in the family connection and how we can really learn from our ancestors. So, Ben, I'd love for you to share.
I was born in Krakow, Poland, to a wonderful family. We were a family of 7. And out of the family of 7, only 2 of us survived. My sister Lola and I. The rest were all slaughtered by the Nazis. We lived in a big 3-story building on a major thoroughfare. And one morning, the whole building started to shake and rattle. I ran to the window to see what happened, and I saw tanks were rolling down the street, and following the tanks, they were half-tracks, and following the half-tracks, they were the Wehrmacht with a foot soldier. It was quite impressionable, and as soon as they passed the street, my father called us into the dining room, set us kids down on chairs, and said, okay, from this moment on, there are no more children. You're all adults, no kids. You're adults. You're going to obey, you're going to listen. And this is how we grew up overnight. I wasn't even 11 years old at the time.
Ben, did you have an idea of what was happening during that time?
Yes. On the 5th day of occupation of Krakow, a truck pulls up to the gate where we lived, and full of soldiers. Early in the morning, they started to bang on the gate. The super came running out, finding out, what's happening? All they wanted to know is where the Jewish people lived. And he was quick to oblige. He showed our apartment and our neighbor's apartment. So the neighbor had 2 daughters, little younger than I, and mother gave birth to an infant little boy 2 months earlier. And they came running in, breaking down the doors and pistol whipping us. We were in bed. In their hands, they had sacks, open sacks. They were yelling, throw in all your valuables, money, gold, silver, anything they can find of value. They threw in. And they're beating up my father to open up the safe. While my father's trying to open the safe, we hear the terrible screaming from our neighbor's apartment. My sister Lola and I ran out through the kitchen door into their kitchen door in the yard and their kitchen door, and this is what we saw. This monster was holding the infant little boy by its legs and swinging him and yelling to the parents, make him shut up. The parents and the daughters are yelling, our baby, don't hurt our baby. With a smirk on his face, you can see he was enjoying what he was doing. It's a memory that won't leave me. My God.
I do want to remind those who are tuning in that this is a very sensitive topic. And if
Yeah.
this is troublesome to hear, completely understand if you want to pause or move forward, because there is a light to this story. But these are the kind of things that I think many of us cannot even comprehend. And you mentioned, Ben, and thank you so much for being able to share and be so open about this, because I can't even comprehend what it must be like just to have the visuals in your head. But you're able to talk about this. And I want to just step over to Gail for a moment, because as a child of a Holocaust survivor, and this is just the beginning of Ben's journey during the Holocaust, to hear these stories, and I don't really know how much has been shared with you or was shared with you as a child. I do recall that it was your son that asked some questions as to, Grandpa, I want to
Yes.
learn more. So what was it like growing up with a Holocaust survivor that wasn't as open until you had your own children?
Right. My son was in fifth grade when he approached us that his teacher knew that my father was a Holocaust survivor, and so she wanted to see if he could speak to his class, and which we made the arrangements for. I did not hear my father's story really until he was speaking for the Shoah Foundation, till they took his full eyewitness testimony. That's when my sister and I heard it for the first time. We were sitting outside the door. It was 2 days of taping, and that's where we heard it. I knew I'm 5.5 years younger than my sister, so we both knew that he was a survivor. My sister might have known more than I did, but my grandparents on my mother's side also lived across the street from us, and they were survivors of the program in Russia. So we learned their story more than my father's story. We'd sit down at meals and at holidays, and especially every Shabbat, we were always together on Friday nights. And those are the stories we would hear, not my father's. It was shocking when I really learned his story. And I also did have quite a few friends in that I went to school with that were children of Holocaust survivors. I had one parent that was a survivor. A lot of them might have had two parents, and their growing up was a little bit darker than mine. Their curtains were always closed. The houses were dark. The lights were only on in the back of the house. Nothing from the street showed anything. Sometimes some of the parents would sit out on the schoolyard all day long for some of the students. Uh, I did not experience that, but my father did not share the story with me as I was growing up. So I was always kept in the dark a little bit.
Yeah. So, Ben, there's so much to your story. I mean, this is just you as a child sharing, and thank you, Gail, for sharing your part. I want to bounce back to Ben, because you were mentioning the point where you're only 11 and there was so much more that occurred, because you mentioned, I remember, that you were a two-time Holocaust survivor. And I had never heard that, which led me to believe that you had not only been in the company of the Nazis once, but twice. Can you give us an idea of what happened once you were actually taken away the first time?
Well, the first time I wasn't in a camp. The first time I was in ghettos, and living the life in a ghetto is just like being in a Holocaust camp. It's almost the same thing. They had these raids all the time, and they had uh, raids against the Jewish people and raids inside the ghetto and picking up people and killing them and taking them wherever. And surviving that was a miracle, unbelievable miracle. And just the fact that we did not go into the ghetto in Krakow, they made a ghetto, and my father was getting ready to go into the ghetto. His whole family went into the ghetto. A young man walks up to my father. He says, "Mr. Lesser, you know how I feel about your daughter Lola. Someday I'd love to marry her. I'm in love with her. But do me a favor, come to the same communities that my father and I are moving to, called Nepalomice," which is, anyway, my father was preparing to go into the ghetto. His family, over 200, all went into the ghetto. The miracle was that the ghetto was taken to a extermination camp in Belzec, and everybody inside the ghetto was killed. So if we would have gone into the ghetto, I wouldn't be here to tell you the story. But we lived over a year in Nepalomice, and that new community. My father became a little baker. My sister marries Michael, and they move into. They had a nice wedding inside the backyard, and they move into a duplex. One side of the duplex lived the owner of the duplex, who happened to be the mayor of that community. And one night he came home, he said, "Michael, Lola, save yourselves. I heard the rumor there is going to be a raid against the Jewish people tonight or tomorrow night." When Michael heard it, he went out, he hired the wagon with the driver, and we snuck out in the middle of the night. And the only place we can go was into a ghetto. It's the first city called Bochnia. Bochnia had a ghetto. That meant we had to go inside the ghetto. And Bochnia ghetto was terrible. Just to tell you that there was a raid inside the ghetto, and everybody had a hiding place. They call them bunkers. And that's when we found out my hiding place is a place where you hang your coats and your jackets. You open the door, you push the closing apart, the back panel would slide apart. There was a hole in the wall, and 12 of us could stand between two buildings. The last person would close the door behind him, put the closing back, close the back panel. And this is where we stood throughout that whole night. And we heard shootings and dogs barking. We heard our neighbors scream like they were being torn apart by these wild dogs. And in the morning it got quiet. We dared to come out. When we came out, we couldn't believe what our eyes are seeing.
Understanding the Holocaust is one thing, and hearing the stories from the mouth of someone who actually witnessed the atrocities. What where is the point where that too much might be too much for, say, if you're at a school, or even what you're sharing here? I mean, even as somebody who does the kind of work I do, hearing this, even all the research I've done, does not put me in the situation. And I imagine there are a lot of people that can feel very uncomfortable with hearing many of these atrocities. It's almost like you just want to forget, like I said earlier, what's said. And we can't forget, but where's the point where what is okay to share and you feel comfortable sharing, especially with younger minds?
The younger minds, I skip a lot.
Yeah,
And I skipped a lot with you
I
too.
imagine.
But omitting anything makes it sound not so bad,
Yeah, that's a good point.
not so bad. It was worse than bad. It was terrible
Yeah.
what we went through. My God! And then my escaping in a coal truck with coal on top and 10 people under the coal. And we were escaping Poland, going to Hungary because Hungary was still a free country in 1943. And crossed the way we crossed the borders. I mean, I don't have the time to go into details, but it's one miracle after another, one miracle after another. You almost have to read my book.
And I want to mention that. Can we mention the book briefly? I know you probably have a copy there, and I'm going to put that in the notes of this podcast. There's so much literature that's been written by different authors. Your book, Living a Life That Matters, The Nazi Nightmare to an American Dream. We're going to put that book in the notes of the podcast. And also, before we go further, I do want to mention that you have this incredible foundation, the Zachor Holocaust Remembrance Foundation. By the way, for those who don't speak Hebrew, Zachor means remember, to remember. So it was founded by you, Ben, in 2009 as a reminder never to forget. You offer educational programs, online outreach resources, and a way you're an advocate for change for the future by teaching tolerance, but more importantly, Gail, you mentioned this, by teaching love, by choosing love. And how when somebody is going through something like this, and Ben, I want to come back to you in a moment, but Gail, when you hear stories of what your father went through, going all your life, not hearing this and hearing it over and over, how are you taking that in? How have you been able to process this in a way like, this was my father's life before I was even here?
And it's surreal.
Yeah.
I mean, it's impossible to believe that he actually went through this. My dad went through this. It's really hard to believe. But I also work with it, and we're in front of students all the time. You know, Ben and I are together, I'd say very minimum of 4 days a week on calls right now, Zooming or speaking in the classrooms or traveling someplace. So I'm hearing it over and over, and it's almost become like a script to me in my head. Part of that script is something that I'm hearing, and the other part is something that I'm just seeing in the pictures that go through my head. It's very hard to believe. I try also I'm 67 years old now, and I try to, through the years that I've been seeing it, I've been picturing myself in those situations. I would have never survived. I
You say that. You
It's
say
hard.
that, and it's almost impossible to see it any other way when we hear the atrocities. But the resilience of a human being right here, you're the product of somebody who was able to not only get out, but thrive and move to the States and create a family and a life together. So I think
That's right.
sometimes we don't realize our own resilience and abilities. you know?
And he started a family
Yeah.
and had jobs, every odd and end job he could come up with to make money.
Yeah.
And then when he retired, that's when he went into speaking full time.
Yeah.
And then he just knew that he had to do more than just a memoir. He had to, create a curriculum. He had to create an AI so people could come on our site and ask Ben a question through it, whether it's on their phone or
Mhm.
on their computer, and it answers them back. And that's going to be, this is Ben's calling to have this. And it's hard for me to say these words, to have this here for generations to come.
Yeah.
After Ben is gone, his voice is still going to be heard. Besides being heard through myself, my children, my grandchildren, his grandchildren, great grandchildren, that voice will also be heard through through the website
Yeah.
and the educational programs.
And I just want to mention too, thank you, Gail. Ben, you are 96 years young. You are still going strong. Before we were recording, Gail had mentioned that you're still up and about and she has to keep up with you. This is somebody with a new lease on life, not once, but twice. And, Gail, you bring up a really important point about telling the story as they go on. I know you have the Zachor Holocaust Remembrance Foundation. Not everyone has a foundation who has been through the
No.
Holocaust or other atrocities around the world. But where that reminds me, it reminds me of that. There's a quote. I think it's Elie Wiesel. It said, "Whoever listens to a witness becomes a witness," meaning
That's
that
right.
we once you are in the presence of someone sharing the story, you have a responsibility, right?
That's right. This is the reason why I am doing what I'm doing, and to keep this world from acquiring amnesia. So I depend on people who listen to me to continue telling the story. That's the whole idea. I speak all over the world.
Mm.
And in Germany, especially, the German chancellor gave me this highest award
Mm.
for any civilian received in Germany. For what? For Zachor Foundation. I'm teaching Don't Forget About the Holocaust, remember. And he gave me an award for that. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's not the same Germany as it used to be.
That's another point I'd like to touch on, that
And
how, as somebody who's been through something where, we can blame an entire culture and group of people for something, and to be a Jew and be in presence with someone who's German, there are people who have still that problem of being able to have some kind of a relationship, because many times we're separating ourselves. It's the us versus them. How were you able to find, and if you were, I don't want to assume this, forgiveness?
no, I could never forgive the perpetrators of the Holocaust, but I don't blame their children and their grandchildren. It's not their fault.
Mm.
In fact, Rudolf Höss, who happened to be the biggest killer in Auschwitz, the head of Auschwitz, his grandson and I were close friends. We were traveling together and speaking in schools together. He came to my house, I came to his house in Germany. I can't blame him for his grandfather. How can I blame him? The children's not their fault. And I tell them that. I now made a book.
It's going out to the students in Lower Bavaria. The government helped us with this pamphlet, and it was designed by Ben and a teacher in
Okay.
Germany.
This is an opportunity for Ben to tell the story across the world where it needs to be told, around the world.
Right.
I appreciate you sharing that. We'll share more on that as well. can we go back a little bit, because I know that we were just touching on the next phase of your experience. And again, for those just tuning in, or if you fast forwarded a little bit, because we are sharing some very personal information. Ben Lesser, he is a Holocaust survivor. His daughter, Gail Lesser Gerber, joins us as well. I really want this time and space to be here to share this story, for Ben to share his story, because listen, friends, there aren't that many Holocaust survivors left on this planet. And it's like I said earlier, if we do not continue to tell these stories, or as Ben puts it, acquire amnesia, we don't know what could happen once the stories are no longer told. It's our responsibility as witnesses to the story to continue telling the stories as best we can. So this is the perfect time to do that, as we're going into the season of Passover, of Easter. Honestly, every day, any day you're sharing with family when you're surrounded at the table, and if you know somebody who's been through something, give them the space to share. Be open-minded. And this is a chance to learn and not only be tolerant, but become more informed. And what you had said, both of you, Gail and Ben, it's about the importance of choosing love over hate. And obviously, Ben, we're hearing that from
Right.
you, that that is a choice you made. You could have easily gone to hate, even with the grandson of somebody who was just a monster. And you made a conscious choice to come from a place of the heart. Going back to your story, you then went on to the camps at some point, and I imagine that that was a completely different experience than anything.
Yeah. Right. From Hungary, eventually the Nazis came into Hungary. It was in March of 1944. They came into Hungary like they were invited guests. They knew every Jewish person, where they lived, their education, their businesses, addresses, everything. How? They didn't have computers in those days. IBM had punch cards. They would sell these punch cards to anyone who would pay the price. IBM doesn't deny it. They just say they had no idea to what purpose they're going to use these punch cards. Anyway, 4 weeks they were already shuttling Jewish people to the death camps. And this is what they told us. Germany needs workers. Okay, able-bodied men and women will be working in Germany. Everybody will be relocated to Germany. Children will be schooled. Older people will be cared for. Bring along all your valuables that you can carry with you. Leave everything else behind. Anyone found hiding will be shot. And people believed that they were dragging along all their valuables that you can carry with them. And they put us in kettle cars, 82 kettle car. You should never have to experience anything like it. Imagine 80 people. It wouldn't be as bad if it were not for the valises and the bundles. Now it got so tight that if anyone wanted to sit down, someone had to stand up. Mm-hmm. After the water was gone, there were 2 buckets of water. After the water was gone, there were no sanitary facilities, no toilets. 80 people, imagine. So they started to use those buckets. Pretty soon those buckets got filled up and they would overflow. And can you imagine, we couldn't sit on the floor anymore. We had to sit on bundles. We were happy we had bundles.
How old were you at this point, Ben?
I was 15 and a half at this point. After 3 days, we arrived at a place called Auschwitz. Auschwitz is Auschwitz in Polish. Anyway, they opened, when we arrived, it was nighttime. We went to Birkenau. Birkenau was a camp, part of Auschwitz. Birkenau was where most of the killing was done, was in Birkenau. And we arrived with it. It was nighttime. They opened up the doors and they yelled, "Leave all your belongings on the floor. Don't you pick anything up. Women and children to the right, men to the left." I'm holding on to my sister Goldie, my little brother Tuli. They're just being ripped away from me. I never saw them again. They went to the gas chambers directly. Who knew? We didn't know about gas chambers. And I was 15 and a half. I could have gone with my sister and my little brother. But something told me, if this is a labor camp, they want you to labor. And if you labor, they'll feed you better. That was the only reason I went with my uncle, my cousin, instead of going with the children. This was a funny place. It was nighttime and it looked like it was snowing. Ashes are flying all over the place. We see chimneys, 5 chimneys with flames shooting out, and the ashes are spewing. And every time we make a step, you leave a footprint in the ashes. Funny smell, and we see a doctor in front of us. There was Dr. Mengele, the angel of death. He decided who should live, who shall die, with a flick of a finger. And I come in front of him, and he asked the young man a question. Kannst du 5 kilometers laufen? Can you run 5 kilometers? Or would you rather go by truck? He said he would rather go by truck. He had a bad knee. Poor soul, not realizing they sent him to the right, which was to be killed. But who knew? Nobody knew. But it didn't make sense to Ben Lesser. Why would he ask such a question? I see the barracks are right here. Why would he ask, can you run 5 kilometers? I tell my uncle, my cousin, whatever he asks you, tell him you can run, you can work, you're healthy. I figured he's testing us to see if we're strong enough to work. And I says, let me go first because I spoke German. So I walk up to him, tiptoed, stretched myself out and saluted him. Said, 18 Jahre alt, gesund und arbeitsfähig. I'm 18 years old, I'm healthy and I can work. He did ask me, kannst du 5 kilometers laufen? Can you run 5 kilometers? I said, jawohl, yes. And they sent me to the left. That was another miracle. If I didn't say that, if he knew my age, I wouldn't be here.
Wow. Wow. That is powerful. And at that time you were 15, you said, yeah?
15 and a half.
15, and to have the insight and the awareness. I feel like there's something in us that guides us. There was a gut instinct to tell you what to do.
I had about 15 times there's life-threatening miracles. I survived them. I always said the right thing, and I did the right thing at the right time. I asked myself, how come? How was I so lucky? I figured God needed a witness, someone who can talk about it at my age. That's why I decided to start the Zachor Foundation to keep this world from acquiring amnesia.
And I want to remind folks, we're talking with Ben and his daughter, Gail, bless her. And Ben started this foundation, the Zachor Holocaust Remembrance Foundation, in 2009. Your whole plan, your whole mission at this point, after going through such atrocities and such trauma, to be able to talk about this at this point in your life. And really, this isn't a story you've been telling forever, not openly broadcasting it. Sometimes those stories we tell inside, we don't share it with others. But Gail, you had brought up that it was your son that came to his grandfather and said that can you tell your story? Can you give us a little bit background about that? And then we'll go back to Ben.
My son Adam, who was in fifth grade,
Mhm.
his teacher found out that my father was a Holocaust survivor, and they asked if he could speak to the class. This would have been Ben's very first time speaking to the class. We were learning his story as adults just around that time. And my son was in fifth grade. Um, from Ben talks about how he had to touch the door handle of the door to go into the classroom. And almost felt like his stomach turned upside down, that he was going to like the principal's office, or he had no idea what he was going to say to these
Mm.
young fifth graders. He started talking and talking, and to this day he hasn't stopped saying.
I will say that you definitely have a gift for gab and speaking. For you, Ben, how is it therapeutic? Is it cathartic? Is there some healing part to being able to share the story, knowing that you are putting the responsibility on these future generations to keep telling the stories?
I feel good if I really relay and the listeners grasp it. It doesn't just go in one ear and out the other. And this is what happened in fifth grade when they gave me 1 hour to speak from 10 to 11. I spoke from 10 to 11, from 11 to 12, and it was lunch hour. The bell was ringing. Nobody's budging. The teacher had to chase them out, and they came out in the hallway. Instead of going for food, they surrounded me, just wanted to touch me, ask me questions. That's when I realized, Ben, you have to do something. You can't keep silent.
Mm.
You got to let the world know. Look, fifth graders, and it really penetrated to them. My God, how did anyone survive this? They couldn't believe it.
They were silent. They were silent. Their mouths were open. They were amazed by the story. Not, Ben has even spoken in prisons and detention centers where they could go up and have a cigarette, go away and have a cigarette and come back. People don't leave. They just sit there and listen. His story is so intriguing, and he's been in more than Auschwitz. He's been was spent a year in a hard labor
Mhm.
camp, and there's so much to his stories about diamonds being put in the heels of his shoes. And this is how he was able to save his uncle's life. Another couple weeks was with due to the diamonds, and he was able to walk with those diamonds in his shoes in Auschwitz, where everybody is inspecting you and you're completely naked. It's like they didn't see his shoes at all. There are so many intricate little stories.
Yeah.
He had beatings. One of the things that we're very strong with when we speak to students is that we invite them, first of all, to go home and to give their family members, their siblings, their guardians, their aunts and uncles and grandparents and parents hugs and kisses and tell them that they love them. We also really encourage them to sit down, to put their computers down, to put the games away, to sit down at a meal, especially when we speaking to several generations at a time, to be able to speak to their family members with kids in their faces
Yeah.
and their computers and playing their games. They're not communicating anymore. They're not having one-on-one conversations. It's all about them and all about themselves. But if they take the time and the family takes the time to learn about the family's history, that also kind of creates empathy in a
Absolutely.
child.
Empathy and compassion, and sure, and a desire to want to know more.
And it's very important for families of today, for our students today, because this is the only way we're going to get the message across to the generations to come. Yes, there was a Holocaust. Yes, Ben Lesser was a survivor. And Ben started giving these pins, our Zachor pins. Zachor, this is the Hebrew word Zachor, it means remember. And to give them out to students. We've given out almost 1.5 million pins to date. It might even be a little bit over that. We lost track a while back when it was well over 1 million. These pins went to every listener that heard Ben's story in person.
You can also purchase these pins on your website as well. I noticed that as well.
On our website, on our shop page.
Perfect.
And these pins, with this pin goes the story. We have students going to Poland soon to do the March of the Living. They march out of Auschwitz, and what they do is we give them these pins to take with them, and with information about Ben's story, and they share it with other students from around the world. There's tens of thousands, I don't know, about 40,000 students that come from all around the world to come to this event and to walk out of Auschwitz instead of walking in. And
the choice.
they share these pins.
It's a choice.
It's really quite spectacular.
That's amazing to know that that's happening, and that's really part of the witnessing and keeping the stories alive, not necessarily the feelings that are associated with it, because nobody can really feel it other than the person. You know, we can feel the secondary traumatic stress from it, but
shock.
Right. But, you know, my thought with this is like, what is next? You know, obviously your time in Auschwitz and the camps came to an end and you were able to leave, you were liberated, but it didn't come without so much trauma and tragedy. Is that what's shared in the book? Is the book like the full-on story?
Except for one thing. You know, the Death March made us like zombies. We were just marching. We didn't know how long it's been. You know, time didn't mean anything. They did the same thing every day. In my book, I said we marched on the Death March 3 or 4 weeks. A German professor called up Gail, who read my book, and he loved it so much he asked permission to translate it in German. But he says Mr. Lesser made 2 mistakes in his book. What? One mistake, I said 3 or 4 weeks, Death March. He says Mr. Lesser marched 7 weeks, 456 kilometers from Birkenau to Buchenwald. And he knows. I don't know how I survived 7 weeks. All I remember, the last week, my shoes fell apart. So I was marching in snow, barefooted. And I had to keep up with the soldier. If you slowed down, they shot you. It was one miracle after another, and I survived it for a reason. And the reason is the Zachor Holocaust Remembrance Foundation. That's the reason.
Not even knowing it then, at 15 years old. Had no clue, just a determination that
he's leaving his footsteps in time.
Oh yeah, that's a good way.
Footprint in time.
Yeah. And I can imagine if you're marching that long, the days just turn into one big day, and 4 weeks, 7 weeks. Your whole idea is just to keep marching.
We're being shot constantly.
Was that mindset that you had that first day when your siblings were taken from you and you said, I know this is a labor camp. I know they want me to do labor. And that mindset you have, did that stay with you the whole time?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
One of the things that Ben tells students also is about choices, the choices you make for yourself. And he made up his mind right then and there that he was going to do the very best he can and at everything that he was asked to do. If they, whatever they wanted him to do, he was going to be the best at it, not give them any excuse of why they should shoot him. I also have had very intimate talks with my dad about what was going through his mind. It has, I know that a lot of people, you know, what was going through their head is, I don't want to die now. I don't want to die now. I can't die now. I can't die now. They were living each moment not to die.
Mm.
Well, Ben, his thoughts were just the opposite. He was living every moment. What do I need to do to live another moment, to live another moment? So
Mm.
it's the same type of thought, but
You're reframing it.
it's
Yeah.
how it's your own self-talk that you're giving yourself in
Yes.
your head. His was, how am I going to continue to live?
Yeah.
It wasn't about dying, it was about living.
It's really changing the narrative. Yeah, and we talk about that a lot. We're hearing a lot about self-talk in this day and age, and if we can put that kind of mindset or share that kind of mindset that you have a choice, right? Like you said, there's a choice. You can go to the negative with your thoughts, or you can reframe them in a way that's more resilient and positive. The outcome could be the same, but how you look at it can determine a big part of that. So,
Ben had a beating. He was in when he was in Birkenau,
mm,
which was a rock quarry,
mm,
and it was very backbreaking work, very difficult. They'd have to sledge these huge boulders, break them down so they're sizable rocks, put them into these carts and haul them down the mountain, and then bring the empty metal carts back up the mountain.
Every time we would come back from work, we would line up in rows of fives. They would count us, dismiss us, and we go for our rations and into our barracks. One evening we came back and they count and they count and they count, and the commandant comes down with his Fräulein, his girlfriend. He says, I'm going to show these Schweinhunde a lesson they'll never forget. What happened? 3 inmates escaped, and because of this, he orders his henchmen to pull out every 10th person in line to receive 25 lashes. And as they're pulling out every 10th person in line, I can see that my uncle who was in front of me is going to be at 10. So I push him behind me, and I took his place. I became a number 10. They took us in the middle of the yard, and they brought down hardwood stakes 1 inch by 2.5 feet, and they brought down a sawhorse. You know what a
yeah,
sawhorse?
yeah.
And this is what they ordered us to do: stand in front of the sawhorse, tiptoe. Your heel cannot touch the ground. Bend over the sawhorse, but your stomach cannot touch the 2x4 on the sawhorse. So you're like midair. One man is holding your trousers, pulling it real tight. The other one starts to hit, and you have to count out loud. If you miscount, you start from 1 again. If your heel touches the ground, you start from 1 again. Your stomach touches the 2x4, you start from 1 again. It was almost impossible. I was number 4. The 3 in front of me fell apart. They miscounted, they touched the ground, touched again and again, and all 3 in front of me were shot. And they pushed them aside. And Ben Lesser is number 4. Don't ask me how that happened, how I survived. Because when I survived, I wondered myself how. The whole camp, you can hear a pin drop. Nobody believed that anyone could survive this. And Ben Lesser survived it. And the man who held my trousers says to me in Yiddish, "Go over and thank the commandant." So I stand up, blood is running down my legs, and I walk over to him, I salute him, and I say, "Danke schön, Herr Kommandant." When he hears that, he puts his hand on my shirt collar, twists me around facing all the number 10s who are still to be beaten. He says, "Now I told you it could be done. If you do it like this, Junge, you have nothing to worry about." They were pulling in these 3 inmates who escaped. They caught them. And they were all bloody. They were pulling him and he couldn't recognize him. When the commandant saw that, just like a child gets sick of a toy and throws it away, he told all of us number 10 to go back to our original line, and he orders his henchmen to bring down a portable gallows, and we all had to watch while they were hanging, each one individually on its gallows. I'll never forget the last one was younger. They put the noose around him. He yelled out, "Shema Yisrael," which is a Hebrew prayer before you die. When they heard it, they kicked the stool out from under him. They wouldn't let him complete the last 2 words, Adonai Echad, God is one. They were such sadists. And then they dismissed us like nothing ever happened.
Ben, your thought that was going through your head when it was time for you to go up for that beating, what did you say to yourself?
I tiptoed and I bent over without touching the 2x4, and I said, "Ben, this is it. If you want to live another 10 minutes, you got to do it exactly the way they tell you. No ifs or buts, no mistakes." And I did it. I can't believe how anyone could have survived this and without touching the 2x4 not once, or without touching the heel on the ground. It was unbelievable that anyone could survive this, but I survived it. So this is when I realized that God is with me.
Do you also believe that it's not just God, but Ben's unbelievable resilient mindset?
I don't know what else it could be, because afterwards there were another 5 or 6 times that no one believed that you can survive this, but Ben Lesser survived it.
And he survived to be here. He
Here.
survived to do exactly what he's doing.
Yeah.
He was young enough at the time where he's one of the older survivors now that's able to speak. Survivors that have been in the camps really do not speak today because they're much older than Ben. Most of the survivors that do speak today were children of the camp, or children prisoners, and they were adopted or sent away or put in an orphanage. Their stories are different. They're still survivors.
Yeah. And there's so much to this story that we could sit here for hours. I do want to also mention the book, because if you're going to read anything and you want to consider and be a witness and become a witness, even if you're not hearing the story in depth or spending tons of time with Ben himself, and I'm so grateful to be in the space with you twice now, both of you. The book is Living a Life That Matters. And this is your story. We're going to share that in the notes of this podcast, because we just can't do it justice in the time that we have here with all of the stories. And if there's more, what's really beautiful about this is that, Ben, you're still speaking. You still are very active with Zachor Holocaust Remembrance Foundation. You're still up and at 'em and reading to children and talking to children and adults. And I want to really give this moment to those who are tuning in now, that if you're looking for somebody to speak, to share, to learn from. And listen, I'm a professional speaker, so I share stages with a lot of people. It would be an honor to share a stage with
He's your
you.
man. On April 27th, it's Yom HaShoah.
Yes.
That is the remembrance of the Shoah. The Shoah is the Holocaust. This whole month, schools are learning about it, and also it kind of comes together with their history that they've been learning. Come after winter break, they start learning about the Holocaust, and so it's a perfect timing for Ben to come and speak during this time of the year before their end of their school year.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted to bring the both of you on in this month, because I knew so much of what we learned and what's being learned right now is absolutely important. We're not we don't want to miss history. We're never going to understand it fully. And, it's like a page in a book, but it deserves to be more. And what I'd like to do with the time that we do have, if you were to share a message, because I mean, we could talk for hours. At some point, Ben was liberated. At some point, you were able to make a life for yourself in the Americas. And is that also in the book?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, good. I mean, we want to
That's
know
a very
that.
important part,
I
making a good
imagine.
life for yourself.
Of course, because that's a big part of what holistically speaking is about. It's turning those traumas into triumphs. It's seeing the message from the mess, the purpose from the pain. And being able to sit here and hear you share the story, but also know that our listeners and those who watch us on YouTube can really tune in and be in this incredible space with you, Ben, and also you, Gail, because honestly, it's family. It's family. And we have a responsibility, and I can't say it enough. I want people to spend time reading this book. I want them to call the Zachor Foundation and say, we want to hear him speak, rather than just hearing it all here,
Right.
So if you could leave something with our holistically speaking wonderful community, what would that be, Ben?
Put away their little computers and speak with the parents and ask the parents about their history, their story. It's very, very important, very important.
But it's also about the choices that we make
Yeah.
moving forward. And, Ben talks about whether you might have a horrible childhood. And obviously, he had a horrible childhood. And it's his choice that he made to make. I'm sorry, I'm stepping in here, Ben.
It's okay.
He might be a little tired. He had a big appointment before this. Um,
But see,
it's
this is
the
the
choice
perfect
that,
example. I just want to stop real quick.
uh,
This is exactly what I mean. You're sharing the story, your witness to your father's story. This is a true testament to what it means and the responsibility each and every one of us have to continue ancestral storytelling and legacy, even when it's not so positive. So no need to apologize for that, because I think that shows the devotion you have to making sure Ben's story continues on. So please do. Yeah.
I just found out that I'm going on a Navy ship to speak to the Navy.
Where is that?
in San Diego,
Okay.
California.
Yeah.
It's not till November, but I didn't even tell him this yet. Ben will be going on for Yom HaShoah. He will be going to Sacramento to the governor's office, and he's going to be one of the honored Holocaust survivors. He has been for the state of Nevada, and now he will be for California. You don't even know this yet, Dad.
Oh, wow. I love that we're the first place you're
joining
hearing
you.
about it. Do you travel more than just from Nevada and California? Do you actually travel all over the country and the world
We
anymore?
travel to Utah,
Okay.
and Arizona,
Mhm.
the accompanying states,
Yeah.
because the doctor won't let him fly more than 2.5,
Yeah.
maybe 3 hours if we could get away with it,
Wow.
or a private plane. But which is big thinking.
Right.
But really,
Put it out there.
he was invited to speak, of course, in Washington, D.C. again this year for the Veterans Administration and for their big yearly event and be the keynote speaker, but we couldn't do it. It's just too long of a flight for him.
I think every person's life you touch is one more person who can keep telling the story. So there isn't that amnesia you talk about. That word just sits with me when you said that the first time, and it's so true. So with that being said, I just want to share space if there is one thing you would like to share before we. What would you
Any
like to
final thing, Dad?
Any final thoughts, Ben?
They should respect their parents and love them. I think it's very important for a child to love their parents and also find out what they can about their history.
And accept, there's acceptance. We need to learn to have acceptance and tolerance for our neighbors. You might not agree with their thinking. Listen to them, learn from them. You don't have to agree, and they could learn about your feelings about things. We need to be able to trust again in this world. We need to be able to accept again in this world. We need to be able to be tolerant of each other. There's too much hatred in this world right now.
Yeah.
And so now's the time. Now is the time. Love thy neighbor.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I appreciate both of you sharing this time with me and our listeners here at HIListically Speaking. I just want to mention to those we're going to share everything in the notes of this podcast about the Zachor Holocaust Remembrance Foundation, about Ben's book, which is Living a Life That Matters, and see if Ben is available to speak at your engagements or do your part. Remember and buy a Zachor pin. You can go on the website. We're going to share the website as well. It's a really wonderful opportunity to say that you've been a witness.
Yeah.
And we are always looking for supporters to help support our foundation and what we do, because that will allow us to continue truly for generations to come after Ben is gone. And we'll mention it also. If you buy the book, buy it from our website. Ben still autographs every book individually. So he will be happy to autograph a book directly to you.
Wonderful.
Don't buy it from Amazon. They're not our books. But anyways, for some reason, we would be honored if you just come and spend a little bit of time on our website. Teachers, we have a curriculum and we have the I Shout Out, which we want students to be able to shout out for what they believe in, against bigotry, against anti-Semitism, to love thy neighbor, to have respect for each other. Ben's goal is to get 6 million shout outs for the 6 million voices that were silenced. And once we accomplish the 6 million, we'll go to 11 million, because there weren't only Jews that were killed during the Holocaust.
Yeah.
There were people that might have had disabilities, people of color. The people of color are not so different through history, how they were treated as the Jews were. They were seen very unfairly, just as the Jews were.
Anybody that wasn't part of the perfect Aryan race, as though they called it. So you're talking, the Russians, the Gypsies, anyone of color, sexual orientation. I mean, and that's something we really need to be mindful of, is that, we can't get rid of inclusivity. That there's no way to do that. We are human beings before anything. Just that's a true reminder. I do want to ask you one question, Ben, and I didn't ask you this earlier, but are you scared of death?
No. But I'd like to live a long time to share my story, but I'm not really scared.
And with the life that you have lived, would you change anything? Or do you think there was a purpose, truly, with what you endured?
Yes, I would change. When I was younger, I would change. For one thing, my parents should have been in America, not in Poland.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Understood.
What can I tell you? I can't change the world.
No, but you are changing one set of ears or eyes at a time. So thank you for everything you do. I have so much gratitude to be able to share this space with you, and it changed me a little bit today. So
And thank you also for what you do. You know, I know that a lot of your clientele and people that listen, a lot of them really might need answers or, search for an answer. There isn't always an answer, but the answer is in you, and it's your positive thinking, and and you being, whether you're a parent or not, it's about you, setting that positive thinking onto your children. Help create this world to be a positive, full of energy world that has people choose love and not hate.
it's always about choosing love. Love that. Beautiful. Thank you so much, both of you. I appreciate it. All right, my friend, you have a responsibility. It's like we said earlier, whoever listens to a witness becomes a witness. So, everything you need to know about Ben Lesser is in the notes of this podcast, how to get in touch with him, to learn more about the Zachor Holocaust Remembrance Foundation, to have him speak and share his story at your school, at your event, at your organization, to pick up a copy of his book, Living the Life That Matters from Nazi Nightmare to American Dream. All of that will be in the notes of this podcast episode. Because the one thing we don't want to happen is for history to repeat itself, right? And I just want to say thank you to those who tune in week after week. I appreciate you. And also to Market Media for editing this podcast, my dear friend Lip Bowden Redding for the music. And I will leave you with this. You do have a choice. You have a choice of how you want to continue the legacy, how you want to make sure that your family's story is told, and your own story. So be the voice and know that that responsibility is a great one, but there's reason for it, right? I love you. I believe in you. And as always, I'm sending hugs your way. Be well.
I know